performance era?
Oh yeah, easy. And it makes a statement going down the road.
It definitely does.
But as I always say to some of the few cars, antique cars, you can drive on the freeway like a modern car.
Yep.
I mean, you can get in the fast lane and hold this thing 70, 75 without straining it even a little bit. I mean, after a little driving, you forget that it's almost a 100-year-old car.
Right.
Feel that supercharger kick in? Yo! Welcome to the episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Once again, visited by automotive royalty from the Nethercutt Collection. This is probably one of, if not the most famous Duesenberg in the world. This is a car that's been around for a long time. It's called the 20 grand. It was never called that from the factory. We'll find that out. But it was called that because at the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933, the Century of Progress, Duesenberg was asked to build sort of the ultimate car. And that's what they did here. And it cost $20,000 when the average price of a car in America was between $600 and $800. I mean, houses were $1,200 to $2,000. So $20,000 for an automobile was just unbelievable. It was the height of the Depression. You know, it was one of those dream cars that people just went crazy. And J.B. Nethercutt restored it years ago, back in the 60s, early 60s, I think it was. He was saving all these cars just about before, not before anybody else, but pretty darn close. And he just did a beautiful restoration on this car. We'll find out. Cameron, come on in. This is Cameron Richards. You remember him. He's the vice president of the Nethercutt Collection. And he's the sort of curator of all these automobiles and brings them to us. How'd she run? Did you drive it over here?
This one was trucked over. She doesn't get out on the road much these days, but drove it down from across Las Vegas a few months ago for the concourse we were at, and that was pretty terrifying but fun.
Yeah. I mean, this is a fast car. 421 cubic inch, twin cam, 4-valve, supercharged, 320 horsepower, which was unbelievable. I mean, I think that's probably, the reaction to that back in the day was the same as the reaction when the Bugatti Veyron came out 20 years ago with 1,000 horsepower. It didn't seem even conceivable. And 320, I mean, a Model T had 22 horsepower. Most cars, a Ford Flathead was 65. So 265 or 320 horsepower was just unbelievable. As you can see, just a beautiful, beautiful car. Rolston body, right?
Yep, it was designed by Gordon Buehrig, and Rolston built the body in New York.
Gordon Buehrig was the designer at Duesenberg. You could get any coach body on a Duesenberg chassis you wanted. A lot of times you bought the chassis like you'd buy fabric and somebody else would make the suit. They did build a lot of factory cars, which were mostly the Murphy bodies, but then a lot of people had their own coach builder and you'd send the chassis off. Is this a one-off body?
This is the only one ever built, yep.
Right, okay,
like you said, it was specially built for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair with the asking price of $20,000, which I think is around $470,000 in today's money.
Yeah, this is the second most expensive Duesenberg ever built, yeah. Well, and the other one was custom built as well. Now, a lot of it are standard Duesenberg parts, the dashboard and all of that, the transmission. You know, a little known fact, all Duesenbergs were built with 4-speed transmissions, but none of them could take the power of this engine. They would just break, you know, guys would floor it or in bust gears. And so they all got recalled to the factory, and they put in this, I know it's not a white trucks, but it's a 3-speed, which is fine. Now we record 0 to 60. In the old days, the way they recorded a car's power was they would put it in high gear, go as slow as they could down to 2 or 3 miles an hour, floor it, and see how smoothly it pulled away. That showed you had a lot of torque, you know, and that was sort of the way they judged the power of a car. It wasn't so much 0 to 60, because a lot of cars wouldn't even do 60.
Right,
You know, that was, as my dad would say, a mile a minute, slow down, you're going a mile a minute. I go, Pop, the speed limit's 65, Dad. A mile a minute's not that big a deal anymore. You know, my father could never get that out of his head. But just such a beautiful, can we open the hood and show them the...
Absolutely.
The supercharger. This has the famous Duesenberg centrifugal supercharger. I think it's always easier to bust the bottom one first, right?
Yep, and I always forget that. Okay.
Okay, as you can see, You don't get restorations much better than this. Nethercutt always did just amazing, amazing work. One Pebble Beach, probably more than anybody, I think.
We have the most trophies at Pebble.
Yeah, most trophies at Pebble Beach, yeah.
Very proud of that.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Here is your centrifugal supercharger here, driven off the center of the crank. This is your Bonjour oiling system here, of course, carburetor, and your exhaust pipes here. You know, you couldn't send a Duesenberg down to the local garage. You know, Clem at the Shell station is not going to know how to fix this thing. I mean, a valve job on one of these was 40 hours, and that was the book. It was a whole week to adjust the valves because it was so complex and so much work. But an engine so far ahead of its time. This was the most powerful engine in America up until the Hemi came out in the mid-50s. But this was it from 1928 up until about 55. It didn't get any more powerful.
It was quite the gap.
Fast and fun to drive. You know, Duesenberg is one of the few classes you can drive like a regular car, 75, 80 on the freeway, no problem. I put 354 gears in mine, so at 65, you're turning 2,300 RPM, so it's really
just purring, yeah.
Really good. The Duesenberg was also the first car to have a computer. It's a mechanical computer, not a computer as we think of these days. But you have, what you have is a series of gears, and the gears would come around, and I think it's every 1,500 miles a light would come on, tell you to check the water. Every 80 miles, I think, the chassis got lubricated. There was a plunger that come around. The plunger would push fluid down, and it would shoot oil to all the lubrication points. A lot of guys disconnected it because it left spots on your garage floor. You would have, you know, yeah. But just all kinds of innovations like that. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, these Duesenbergs were so ahead of their time. We have some Rolls Royces from the 50s, 60s, and the 70s, and they still don't really compete to what these were back in the day.
I mean, my two favorite engines of this period was the W. Bentley 6 and the Duesenberg, and they were pretty evenly matched. The Bentley came with a 4-speed transmission, which I wish this had.
Right.
But yeah, in some ways it had sort of old-fashioned engineering too. The big railroad handbrake that grips the transmission, you can pull that thing in. But again, the first car, certainly American car with hydraulic brakes, 1922, I believe. And this has 4-wheel hydraulic brakes. They actually stop and drive pretty good. They're not a quiet car. You know, Packard's just sort of silent. Duesenbergs were a little flashier. These were, you know, these are for new money.
Yeah.
Packards, Pierce Arrows, that was the old money.
Yep.
This was for the flashy guy that, hey, I've arrived. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, sure, I'll tell you, you know, those kind of guys.
It is interesting, too, because Duesenbergs were really for drivers.
Right.
People who were buying them didn't really want to sit in the back and be chauffeured around, although this car is built to accommodate that. But all the owners of this particular car, they didn't just let them sit around or get chauffeured. They were driving them.
You had a divider window. Does this have the divider window? Yeah.
Yep.
So you got the divider window and the 2 big luxury seats in the back. And you have a full dashboard in the back seat so the person can see how fast the driver's going and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is for the driver, chauffeur, you know. So the driver's compartment is much more comfortable because it was meant for the owner. You know, you tell the chauffeur cars, there'd be leather in the back and just cheap cloth.
Right, yep.
And no top here.
Yeah, you get stuck out in the rain.
And is this leather? Is this?
It is, yep. Okay. Leather top.
And leather top was, so every time it rained, just go back to the factory and they put a new leather top on. What could be easier than that? Yeah. This is a whole different class of money. This is for, I guess the equivalent would be something like a Bugatti Veyron.
For the era, yes. And my great-grandfather bought this car in 1979, and people told him he was crazy for how much he paid for it, which was $130,000. A lot of money back then.
Wow. He bought it in 79. Oh, that's so funny. I thought he owned it since the 60s. That's interesting.
So the car was restored in 1979 because somewhere in the 70s it was painted black and modernized. And when JB bought it, he completely restored it back to the original condition in 33. And the even more interesting fact about the 33 Chicago World's Fair, mainly because of the asking price, but nobody bought this car.
Right.
So it actually sat for a year, and then they painted it black and sold it for the 34 World's Fair. where a man named Shreve Archer bought it, who's one of the founders of AMD Foods.
Okay.
And he was a Duesenberg enthusiast. He owns several already, and he still paid the full price of $20,000 back then.
If you could afford one of these in 1933, you were probably in your 40s, early 50s, which means you were born before the automobile had even been invented.
Right.
And then to watch it go from a little horse and buggy kind of thing with a tiller steering to this in your lifetime, it must have seemed incredible. I mean, things are moving pretty quickly. That was an amazing era.
Yeah.
And you realize Charles Lindbergh saw us land on the moon. I mean, here's a guy, hey, I flew to Paris. Oh, it's unbelievable. How is that even possible? And then within your lifetime, people go to the moon. I mean, it was just such an amazing 100 years. And that's what this was to celebrate, 100 years of progress since, I guess, 1833. Yeah, pretty amazing. Let's take them around the car. Let's take a look at the back seat here. Look, it looks like theater chairs. It couldn't be more comfortable. This does not have a radio, right? No.
Nope. I spent a lot of time in the back of that car as a kid. And
is that right? Yeah?
A couple of naps maybe when I was younger.
You may have even been conceived in the back of this
car. Who knows?
That's right. You never know.
I don't want to find that in our
you'd have to be a
in our archives,
I think. Yeah, but but it's beautiful wood. This is only 130 grand in 1979. Jeez. Okay.
The car has just been what we call, when we do the guided tours at the museum, this is the crown jewel. Everybody loves it. It's a fan favorite. And this car has actually been to Essen, Germany before, when JB owned it, for the 10 most beautiful cars in the world, I believe it was called.
Right.
This car has been all over the United States. It's fun showing her too, the reactions.
It is a beautiful design. And it has the trunk integral with the car, as opposed to most cars had the luggage rack with some sort of wicker basket or something on the top. Yeah. And the full complement of gauges like all Duesenbergs.
And there's an altimeter as well on the on the dash, which I just find so fascinating.
Well, I think the altimeter was there because Lindbergh had just flown the ocean, and the thing was airplane-style dashboards. You had the sophistication of an airplane. An airplane flew from New York to Paris without stopping all the way across the ocean. So that meant aircraft was high-tech and well-built, or whatever you want to call it, you know. So the idea of, why would you have an altimeter in a car? It doesn't really make any sense other than to go, you know, it's like plane Lindbergh flew. This has got an altimeter. Oh, really? You know, it was just a talking point, you know. But a fascinating one as well. And look at these doors, the way the wood is. I mean, just amazing. It's so funny with these things. When you're in them, it's almost impossible to get your arm to put this window up. It's just so weird. Ergonomics was not like a big deal. But that's like a bank vault. It's amazing.
Love that sound.
This is sort of the crown jewel. This was the Duesenberg that represented what Duesenberg was all about. And it's so at the World's Fair, they couldn't sell it even for 20 grand. It's such a crazy amount of money.
That's a lot of money back then.
Yeah. We should also mention this uses an updraft carburetor. Later cars would have downdraft. See, what happens, you have your needle, which keeps the gas from flowing, but unless the carburetor seals, what happens is if you have the carburetor up here and a downdraft, gas would leak down into the motor, fill a cylinder, and either hydraulic or could even blow the engine. So this way, it would just drip on the ground. That's why this cover is here. If the carburetor does leak, it goes off to the side and goes on the ground. Harmlessly on the ground, yeah. But that's why you have this. That's why it has this updraft. It pulls it so the engine, you don't shut the engine off and the float bowl can't leak down. But okay, let's shut it. Let's give it a shot here. And of course, that's the correct apple green. That was all Duesenberg engines were apple green.
Yeah, this is by far my least favorite thing to do when we show her.
Yeah, getting all those to line up. And when it's hot, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's really fun when it's warm. There we go.
There we go.
Like a glove.
There you are, yeah. There we go. Let's take a look at the trunk. You had this luggage rack. This folds out and comes out this way, so you could stack a big box in, because this trunk is not that big. Let's take a look.
A couple overnight bags, maybe.
Yeah, no golf clubs. If you play miniature golf, then I think you'd be okay. But if you play regular golf, no. That's the funny thing about these. They're enormous, but there's no room in it. I mean, there's really not a lot of room in this car. It's a little cramped. And this is the long wheelbase, right? Yeah.
Correct, yep.
And it's still even driving it, you're sort of like this. That shows you how far ergonomics have come. But that's a nice little trunk, but not really big. And of course, you have the giant backup lights and stop lights. When you hit the brakes, it says stop right on the light. You know, so if you're close enough to read that, you're going to hit the guy, so don't worry about it. But and you have exhaust cutouts. You can open those up to free up a little more noise and maybe get a little more power.
Yeah, those are very fun, too.
Yeah, those are fun. This is not a quiet. You didn't go gently into that good night with this car. This just made a statement, you know.
Yeah, it's basically a hot rod, but with
I mean,
a whole lot of
this is
elegance.
what you use to run over poor people.
This car was getting tomatoes thrown at it on Wall Street for sure.
Oh, yeah. Tomatoes, you're lucky. Rocks. Mine, the one that belonged to Lily, I mean, that's why he got rid of it. He'd drive it in India. People throw rocks. You're rich.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. Hilarious. Because, I mean, a $20,000 car, when people are selling apples on the street,
right?
You know, please. Yeah, it was a little obvious, you know. That's why Henry Ford built a town car version of the Model T, just so rich people go, see, we're not as obnoxious as that guy, you know. So that was sort of the idea. But this ornament was called the Duesenberg. You know, Fred and Augie Duesenberg really didn't want a hood ornament on their car. A lot of the early cars don't have, but dealers demanded it because Rolls-Royce had the Flying Lady and Packard had the Cormorant and Lincoln had, you know, everybody had some sort of impressive looking, so they just felt it was necessary. So it was kind of a dealer option. But it's fine. I mean, it's sharp. You impale somebody on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's too flashy either, but it complements the car very well.
Yeah, the car pretty much speaks for itself.
Yeah, there's actually a replica of one of these with Glass Eagle that sold for over $100,000.
Like the Lalique. Lalique would make glass ornaments.
Right.
For your car.
It was pretty funny to find pictures of it on the internet because it doesn't look like or 20 grand, and then come to find out they built a replica of it.
More like $20. Yeah. I think it was fiberglass too, probably.
Probably, yeah. I would like the old big heavy girl instead. She's over 7,000 pounds in weight.
I know, it's amazing. Well, let's take her for a ride. Come on, see what she does. Well, you can feel the power. She got plenty of acceleration.
Yeah, it's funny, the guys they're like family to me. I've known them my whole life, the guys who restored this car, maintained this car.
Right.
And they all have at least one story about one time when they really got on this thing.
Yeah.
And I have done it once as well. It is surprisingly quick for how much she weighs.
Yeah, once you're rolling, boy, it picks up speed quick.
Yeah, it just glides.
Actually, steering box is very nice on this one.
Yeah, once you're moving it, you kind of forget how heavy it is on the nose. My first memory of this car was actually when I was steering it at JB's funeral.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. How old were you when he passed away?
That would have been, let's see, I probably would have been about 6, 7.
Oh, that's how long ago? I guess it has been quite a while.
Yeah. I remember him. I remember Dorothy, my great-grandmother, a little more.
Yeah.
Her and I used to watch movies, the cartoons together, but yeah, the museum, I had an interesting way of growing up around these old cars.
Yeah.
Well, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
This thing had to have what, almost triple the amount of horsepower and torque than anything else from its era?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Easy. It makes a statement going down the road.
It definitely does.
Actually pretty quiet in this thing.
Yeah, not bad. You can have a pretty regular level of a conversation.
So funny, but you didn't get a heater when you bought one of these.
Right.
But you know, you close those vents and there's so much heat from that engine.
Yeah, that really works like a charm.
Yeah.
Because with a lot of these cars, we'll install electric fans, but if we go to Pebble Beach or something, you know, we can't have that.
Right.
And, some of them, the cooling works pretty good for how old they are.
Right. Well, it's also a non-pressurized system. But as I always say, this is one of the few cars, antique cars, you can drive on the freeway like a modern car.
Yep.
I mean, you can get in the fast lane and hold this thing 70, 75 without straining it even a little bit.
Yeah, and it'll probably, if you really wanted to try it, you're going to need a few football fields for stopping, but it'll go well over 100.
And a few oil fills or filling it with gas.
Yeah, they're not very efficient, but I mean, these SJ motors, they're selling for almost $1 million now just for the engine.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. Yeah, my Duesenberg was a tow truck at one point.
Is that right?
The guy had a rack, you know, like a winch in the back of it, you know.
Wow. Yeah, we have a Maybach Zeppelin that was used for a paragliding company. Yeah. It's crazy they built, the Duesenberg brothers had these such elegant, big, beautiful, powerful cars, and it all came from racing.
Right. Well, that's what they did. They built racing engines. And then Cord gave, you know, went to them and said, look, build me the biggest, most impressive American car. Because the Model A Duesenbergs weren't that popular. They're kind of frumpy looking, you know.
Yeah, they
were engineers, not designers. So
yeah.
Right now we're driving a road around the airport. This one is not on the road. It doesn't have any plates on it, so it's not like you'd sneak stealthily through traffic in this car. So people notice it. So we're on a private road around the airport just to get the feel of it and see how it drives and handles it. This one has been so meticulously restored. Everything works nice. The steering box is nice and loose. You know, a lot of times these old cars, the steering tends to bind up. The heavy grease just solidifies and I can't turn the wheel. This just runs and drives fabulous.
Yeah,
feel that supercharger kick in? Yo!
She's saying thank you right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to all the cars in the museum, you know, after so many years of them being accumulated, they tend to sit. But this car's always had the closest eye on it by our guys. A number of years ago, when the Queen was still alive, this car was requested to be in a parade in England, but as far as insurance went and just overall cost, we couldn't really make it happen, unfortunately. Yeah. But that would have been something pretty neat to do.
Yeah, because you got to fly it over and all of that.
Yeah, but it has been to Germany and back. That was in, I believe, the mid to late 80s.
Yeah. Well, it drives like a Duesenberg should.
Suspension's great.
Suspension's good, plenty of power. Road-hugging weight.
Yeah. Look that up in the dictionary, find a picture of this thing.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, my grandmother might hate me for this, but when this car won at Amelia Island, you know, they bring out the champagne and the trophy and the flowers, and my grandma was in a really good mood and popped the cork off of the champagne, and all that champagne and the bubbles just went all over the hood of this thing.
All right. Doesn't look like it damaged anything.
No, we were quick with the wipes on that one.
I mean, after a little driving, you forget that it's almost a 100-year-old car.
Right. I've learned a lot about Duesenbergs from your episodes over the years. Like the whole thing about them all being built in 1928.
Right,
actually, growing up around a car museum, I didn't know that until I watched your episodes.
That's funny. Cameron, thanks for bringing us by. We didn't want to take a chance taking this out on the street because A, it's not licensed or anything yet, and it's probably one of the most valuable cars in the world. But you still get a chance. It feels and drives just like a Duesenberg. It's incredibly fast. You feel that supercharger kick in. This is easily a 120-mile-an-hour car, no problem. So, Cameron, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have the treasures of the Nethercutt brought to our museum here. So thanks again. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. And I appreciate the police escort. It really puts my mind at ease.
Yeah. Well, get out to Nethercutt Museum if you'd like to see this car in person. This and a ton of other great stuff. So thanks for checking it out, you guys. See you next week.